Hi, Dale coming to you from our very temporary BronkBuilt headquarters, and I'm going to show you in this video how I built that vanity right there. That vanity. That vanity. Hey, stop messing around. Let's just get to it. Come on, let's go. I'm building this vanity for the powder room in our new house we're having built. I'm going with walnut as my choice in wood. I'll be using 5/4 solid walnut as well as 3/4 inch walnut plywood. Since I'll need to be gluing up some of these 5/4 pieces to make legs, I decided to start with some very rough cuts, being very generous on the measurements and going several inches larger than I need, and I'll just trim them the final length later. Now for the glue up. I want the legs to be 2 inches by 2 inches. The lumber, or timber for those in the UK or Australia, that I'm using is 5/4 S3S, which means it is surfaced on both faces and gives me one straight edge. Oftentimes you'll need to still run it through your planer, but these came surfaced really nicely and only needed some light sanding. Actual thickness on these is just over 1 inch thick. To get my 2 inches by 2 inches, I need to glue a few of them together. While giving time for that glue to cure, I can now move on to breaking down my plywood sheets. These sheets are large, heavy, and hard to maneuver around, especially on a small job site table saw. To make things easier, I start by breaking down while still in my truck on my sheet good rack. By the way, I have a couple videos on that sheet rack, and I have to say, loading and unloading sheet goods by myself has never been easier since making this, especially when I'm getting multiple sheets. I'm not really going to be giving a lot of dimensions during this video as I'm building it to fit the vanity top that I bought. Before even starting this build, I made sure the vanity top was delivered so that I could build this to fit that specific vanity. My shop is not large, especially in our rental house. This tip goes to even larger shops though. Make sure that you always keep your working area clear. Here I left a couple pencils on my workbench working as my outfeed. Those pencils ended up in my T-slots and blocked me from being able to push the piece all the way through the table saw. I also want to take this time to let you know that I realize it has been a very long time since my last video, and I do appreciate all the queries I received from my regular viewers checking in on me to see if I was okay. All is well, and I really hope to be getting back into a regular cadence where I post at least a video a month. Now that I've got those initial glue ups done, you can see I've got a lot of glue drippings. Now, these would make it so that when I slide it up against the fence on my table saw, it's not going to be straight. They'd wobble. Now, I could come back and scrape these off, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, I've got this piece of scrap plywood that's a 1/2 inch, and I've measured it in many places, and it is 3 inches parallel. So I don't have an issue with that. So that's perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use double-sided tape, and I'm going to glue it up like this. This way it won't move. I can use this part here as a straight edge up against the fence. I will then at that point just shave off just a little bit off of one side. Once that's done, I have my straight edge. I can flip it over, run that up against the fence to cut it to the exact size that I need. If that didn't make sense, I think it will in a second. Really, the only thing you need to be careful of is you make sure that when you tape this on, it doesn't go below this piece of scrap wood so that when it runs on your table saw top, it runs perfectly flat. So just make sure none of it is hanging over the bottom. Get it on there nice and good, nice good seal. So now, when I take this piece and just press it up against it nice and hard,
Now I have this straight edge to run across my table saw fence to just shave off this portion. Then this side is my straight edge for cutting on that side.
So here you can see me using that scrap piece as my reference off of my fence. I just need to barely trim the other side to get rid of all the little glue bits. At least for me, this is so much easier than scraping off the glue. So many times I thought I had scraped off all the glue, only to discover later that there were some bits left when I put on the finish. As we all know, any glue still on the board will not play very nice with the finish at all. This method simply removes all that worry. Once I trim the glue off of one side using the straight edge as my reference, I simply remove the straight edge, as the side I trimmed is now straight and I can reference that off of my fence to clean up the other side. After that, it's simply running all the pieces through the table saw, getting them to the 2" by 2" size that I'm looking for. Now it's time to cut to final lengths. This includes the legs as well as the frame of the Vanity. This is a mix of 2" by 2" pieces as well as 2" by 1" pieces. For this, I could have used my crosscut sled and clamped on a stop block, but to be honest, the crosscut sled got buried by Halloween props and decorations, as it is October after all. So instead of digging it out, I decided to just use my miter gauge. It has a built-in stop block and is quite accurate. Also notice that each piece has some tape on it. This is a big tip. Label everything. If you have more than one piece to your project, label them. Otherwise, it's really easy to mix the pieces up when you get further along in the project.
There's a lot of doweling jigs out there. This is the Jessem. This is the one I use. I bought it with my own money. I can tell you the support is fantastic. One of the things I like about this one is how easy it is to do offsets. I simply use these measuring gauges on the side. I've been putting the dowel holes in the plywood at 3/8 of an inch. I want to have a 1/2 inch reveal, so that's easy enough. All I need to do is loosen this and move it down to a 1/2 inch more, or 5/8 to 7/8. Tighten this up nice and tight, and now I've just created the guide so that I'm going to be a 1/2 inch deeper from this rail, from this fence here. So then I'm going to have my 1/2 inch reveal.
It really helps if you lay out your project as it will be assembled before drilling all your dowel holes. This helps ensure that you are drilling the holes on the correct side of each piece. This really helps even more when you are needing to put dowel holes on multiple sides of some pieces. Once you have everything marked perfectly for where the dowel holes will go, you can use the sides of the Jessem jig referencing off the ends of each piece. Both sides of the Jessem jig are equal distances from the edge to the dowel holes. Now it becomes as easy as pie to make sure all the holes line up across all pieces. No marks, no measurements, no fuss. Simply line up the edge of the jig flush to the end of the piece you are putting the hole in and use the same guide each time for the hole. It really is that easy. Now that all the dowel holes are drilled, it's time to assemble. The first step in the assembly process is to assemble one side. I start by taking a 2" by 1" piece and a 2" by 2" piece and attach them to the side panel, top and bottom. The 2x1 is on the bottom and the 2x2 is on the top. Both will be assembled flush with the front and the back side of the panel. Using glue on all edges as well as the dowels, I clamp it all together. Once that dries, I can then move to the next step and complete the side assembly. That is attaching the legs as well as the bottom cross piece. The Vanity is going to have a bottom slat shelf for holding things like towels, my hidden wireless camera. Come on, just kidding. I'd never do that. That's way too easy to be found. Hiding the camera in the ceiling mounted fan is the best place. Key here is to really have it laid out, and it is probably worth it to do a dry fit. I would just make sure that it's a loose dry fit, as oftentimes once you seat a dowel, it's quite difficult to take it back apart. Once one side is done, simply rinse and repeat the process on the other side. As the side pieces are clamped and waiting for the glue to dry, we can move on to the bottom slat shelf. Well, I could have done these in the same fashion of using dowels, and that would not have been overly difficult. It just seemed like it would take a lot longer than it really needed to be, and it would be a bit of overkill. I decided to use simple pocket holes. Pocket holes will be on the bottom of the shelf just a few inches from the ground so no one will see them. Heck, you can even tell everyone that you use hand-carved mortise and tenon joints on all of the slats and no one will know. I start by drilling all the pocket holes on the ends of each slat. Just one per side, but I do offset them so the slats will not twist once they're installed. I use spacers to get even spacing and attach all the slats to the front piece of the shelf. When using pocket holes, I like to use my drill, not my impact driver. That way I can set the clutch so that it will not drive the screw all the way through the other side of the piece. Attaching the back side of the slat shelf is done the same as the front, except that it is 3/4 of an inch less wide than the front piece. This is to make installation of the Vanity in the powder room easier. The powder room will have a 3/4 inch baseboard as well as a 3/4 inch quarter round. We will need to cut into those so that the Vanity is flush to the wall, but by having the back side of the slat shelf inset 3/4 of an inch, it will rest up against the baseboard and no cutting will be needed. I'll show you this when we get there and it'll make a lot more sense. Moving on to the next step is assembling the back of the Vanity to the bottom of the Vanity cabinet. This is done much like the side pieces. I'm using dowels and gluing the trim pieces to the edges of the plywood. Once I have the edge pieces attached, I then attach the cabinet bottom to the cabinet back. This creates kind of an L shape. It's now at the time where we're going to be making this look like a Vanity. Honestly, this step was giving me the most stress about the entire project. I'm now going to be attaching everything together. I'm assembling both sides to the cabinet back and bottom. There's a lot of dowels in this step, and while I'm very confident the Jessem jig helped me line those dowel holes up perfectly, this is the biggest step in the process. I make sure that I have all the clamps I'm going to be needing as well as any other tool ready to go. I walk through this step multiple times so I know the exact steps I'll be doing. Also, while this isn't the biggest cabinet in the world, it isn't exactly light, so that adds to the work for sure. It's at this point where I see that I forgot something. I forgot to attach the 2" by 2" trim piece that goes across the Vanity front top. The plan was I would be attaching it using dowels like every other trim piece. Since I've already assembled the Vanity carcass, there really isn't any way for me to use dowels at this point. That's okay, I'll use pocket holes to attach this piece. The Vanity will be plenty strong. To ensure that this trim piece does not move while putting in the pocket screws, I do a couple of things. First, I glue it in place. It's critical that this piece is flush to the top for the Vanity top to rest on. I actually let the glue cure for a bit. I then clamp it in place very tightly before driving in the screws. If you've used pocket holes before, you know that sometimes the angle of the screw will cause your piece to move just slightly. Both of these steps should guarantee no movement. The nice thing is that these pocket holes will be hidden. Folks, when making things, mistakes will happen. It's important not to get too frustrated and make a snap decision on how to fix it. Step away for a minute, calm yourself, and figure out the best way to move forward. Attaching the bottom slat shelf is easy. I clamp some scrap wood to the leg so that the shelf is held in place where I want it. I then simply drive home the pocket screws. The vanity carcass is now completely assembled. I did all of the finish sanding as well as pop the grain by misting it with water, let that dry, then do a final light sand. Now I can add finish. I'm not using anything special. I'm using a spray-on water-based poly. I am going to put several coats on though. I'll very lightly sand with either 400 or 800 grit in between to remove any fuzzies or bumps. I waited until now to build the doors so that I could get actual measurements of the opening. Remember when I said mistakes will happen? Well, for the next several steps in building out the doors, I had my button clicks backwards. When I thought I was clicking record on the camera, I was actually ending the recording. When I thought I was stopping the recording, I was actually starting it. This went on for some time, and I do apologize. I do have some of the final steps of the door creation though. I didn't do standard shaker doors. I used the same construction I've already used with dowels, so you didn't miss much anyways. One thing you can see here though is how I use the indexing pin to the dowel jig. I'm using soft close hidden hinges. I don't know if there is a better jig out there or not, but I can tell you this Kreg jig made the process very easy. Simply line up the holes based on the thickness of your wood, then first drill the larger hole for the hinge, then the two small holes for the hinge screws. This really is amazingly easy.
Okay, it's time to install the doors, and I apologize for all of the echoes and the bad lighting, but we are in a tight space. We're in our new powder room. We had to have the carcass delivered and installed because of timing, because the installers needed to do them all at once, and I was not done with the doors yet. So unfortunately, we've got to install the doors while it is already installed in this tight space. To do this, I've got my both doors. I've built this little jig to help me line things up. And I'll be using playing cards to make sure that I get the height evenly spaced top to bottom. Let's get going.
The jig that I built is using the same thickness of wood that I use for the doors. I use that with playing cards to line up where the hinges need to be on the vanity. Try and get this as close as you can to where you want it, but these hinges do allow for adjustment, so don't stress too much about it. Using the pilot holes I just put in, now attach the vanity portion of the two-piece hinge. Note that I used a self-centering drill bit to ensure correct pilot hole location, and I do not tighten these in 100% yet. Next is to attach the door portion of the hinge. Because the Kreg jig put all the holes in the right spot, there really isn't a wrong way to do this. I do tighten these down.
All right, the last thing to do now is to just put them on. These work really well. They basically kind of just hook onto the piece that I installed on the cabinet and snap in. They do have some screws for final adjustments, up, down, out, and in. So let's give it a go.
After installing the second door, I saw that they were closing a bit too far, so I'm just tacking in a stop. And here they are with the knobs installed. I'm pretty happy with this actually. For a second, I was actually looking at this as a pretty nice piece of furniture and not simply focusing on all my mistakes. Here is a close-up of what I was talking about. with offsetting the back portion of the slat shelf by 3/4 of an inch. You can see it butts up nicely against the baseboard so that we didn't have to cut around it.
So here you have it. It's finally done. It's installed. The doors still need a little bit of fine-tuning adjustments to even out the gaps all the way around, but it works perfect. I really love the way it looks. I think we've got a winner here. I do wish I would have been able to install it myself. Honestly, I think I might have been able to do a little better job that was done for installing it, but my schedule did not match to when the builder needed it to be in, so we had to go with his guy. Let me know down in the comments how you think I did. If you think I could have done better in some areas, let me know. I do like getting constructive criticism. But until next time, see ya.